Okay, so welcome back to the second part. Can you just put your hands up if you can see the slide that says an introduction to exploratory action research? Good. You can see that? That's great. Okay. So we ended the first part by I was just showing you these two resources which are online, and this is where you can get much more information than I can give you in just this short time. These two books. One on the left is example stories. The one on the right is more like a step-by-step guide for how to do exploratory action research as a teacher. And we're going to go through some of these steps together. The initial steps of exploring exploratory research. And the first step is to choose a topic. There are many, many possible things that you could be researching. As a reminder here, it could be something that's working in your classroom, something you're unsure about, something you're not working. And remember, in Andrea's case, it was something that was she was unsure about how to wrap up her class. It was the same with the example with Teresa, who was unsure about what kind of music would be best or for her students as background music. Well, you might have lots and lots of different kinds of things that you might be puzzling about, or you might be worried about, even some things that you were pleased about. There are so many possibilities, and I suggest that you just kind of brainstorm some of these on a piece of paper, and then you've got to choose one of them, because you can't do everything, you can't research everything at the same time. So how could you then choose one topic to research? In the book, the handbook, we've given, this is actually one of Paula's ideas, we've given a kind of table where it could help you to choose a topic. And if you could write down the different topics on the left, different problems or different concerns that you may have, and you could just give a score or something, or tick for each one. Is it manageable for you to look into this more deeply? Is it urgent? Which is the most urgent? Which would be the most significant, which could mean for other teachers as well as for yourself, which would be most useful for many people to know about? And which would be, you feel, most engaging for you, which would be most motivating for you to research? In a workshop, a longer workshop, we would spend longer time, and I would ask you now with a partner, for example, to think about some of these questions, and then to help each other to narrow down your topic to one topic. But of course, we haven't got time really, so it's something that I'd encourage you to go and do after this session. So based on Muse, you've just got to choose one area, one topic. In Andrea's case, how to wrap up her class. In Teresa's case, what kind of music would be best for her students. And it's something personal to you, something that's coming from your experience, something that's really important for you, because that will then be motivating to carry on. And this is how I hope you can see it's a very practical thing to do teacher research, something that's going to be really interesting and useful for you. The next step is to go from your puzzle or problem, because usually teachers start with a puzzle or problem. As I said, you could start from a success, but anyway, from successes, puzzles, problems to questions. From problem to question, from puzzle to question. It's a difficult thing to do sometimes. You might just say, oh, my students are not motivated, but you've got to change that into how do my students feel about English activities? Or what do my students say, for example, are motivating activities? Because, remember, research begins with questions, not just a topic, but questions, research questions. Remember, Andrea's questions were these ones. So, in relation to, this is a task for you to think about, to do later. In relation to the issue that you've chosen to focus on, what do you currently see, hear, and feel? What makes you concerned and interested in that topic? What evidence do you have now? And this might mean sitting down just taking a few notes for yourself or writing a few reflections for yourself. But the important thing is, okay, but what do you still need to know? What do you actually not know about the situation? We, as teachers, have many, many assumptions about what's going on in the classroom. A teacher may feel, my students are not motivated. Okay, and I could ask that teacher, or that teacher could ask themselves, what makes you feel that the students are not motivated? And then the teacher will say, well, when I ask them to do pair work, they talk about something else. They don't do the task that I've given them. Okay, well, I would say, well, how many students? Is it all of the students or some of the students? And the teacher might say, well, it's actually most of the students maybe are doing pair work, but some of them are not. So we're already starting to think a bit more deeply about this. Now it's not all my students are unmotivated, it's some of my students are unmotivated. The teacher might ask themselves, well, what do you need to know about, or I might ask that teacher, how do you know, what are they doing? Why are they not doing your task? What reason? The teacher doesn't really know why they're not doing the task. That would then become a research question. Okay, what do students feel about pair work? Could become a research question. Let's have an example. This is an example from Claudio, who is a teacher in Chile. And I was interviewing him about his problem. And through talking with him, we found what he knows about the problem, but we also found what he doesn't know. And that's what becomes his research questions. So I'd like you to listen. I hope that you will hear this. If you can hear the dialogue, then can you put up your hands just at the beginning so that I can see that you can hear? So I'm going to play, it's a video. I'm just going to start it and tell me if you can hear it. That means you put up your hands. So hi Claudio, how's it going?
Hello, fine, super. And you? How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Super.
Yeah, so we're going to have a chat. So could you hear that or not? You can hear the sound? That's good. Is it loud enough? Is it loud enough? I'll make it a bit louder. Okay, good. Right, I'm going to play it then. If there's a problem, just shout at me, okay? Hi Claudio, how's it going?
Hello, fine, super. And you? How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Super.
Yeah, so we're going to have a chat about your teaching and your recent teaching. Yeah. Just tell me a little bit about the school that you teach in. What kind of school is it?
Okay, I work in a primary school.
Yeah.
I teach from pre-K up to 8th grade.
Oh yeah.
That's children from 4 years old up to 12 years old, 13 years old.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It belongs to the government. It's a municipal school.
Yeah.
Quite vulnerable. I've got, as an average, 38 students per class.
Yeah.
And in some of them, there are students with special needs. Around 7 students per law, according to the law that we have nowadays in Chile.
Oh, I see. So are you facing any particular these days? Are you facing any particular challenges or problems?
Yeah, because the challenge with a special class, with a 6th grade class, students from 11 years old, more or less, and it's a very good class. They are quite motivated. They engage easily with my activities inside of the classroom. I do not have any behavioral problems. They behave properly. They do their task without any demanding. I mean, for them it's easy to do it. And the big challenge that I've got with this class is asking them to speak more English inside of the classroom. I want them to use the English inside of the classroom.
Yes. So that's great to hear that basically they are learning English and sounds like they're quite motivated. But when you say you'd like them to speak more English, do you mean in what kind of situation would you like them to speak more English?
I would like them to use the English that we have to use inside of the classroom.
Yeah.
For example, to make some requests in English, if they want to go to the toilet, if they want to ask for pencils, crayons, or if they don't understand anything, that they can ask for clarification, for example.
Okay, yeah. So like classroom language or classroom
language.
Oh, I see. Okay. Why? Well, since they're already doing well, why do you want them to? So why do you want them to use more English in that situation?
Because I think it's the only possibility that they have to use English. Because outside of the classroom, they're not going to use English anymore. So inside of the classroom is the opportunity that they have to use English.
Yes, I see.
And if they use these commands or this request, I think that they are going to notice that it's useful for them. They are going to communicate in English. They are going to have real communication, real interaction with the language or through the language.
Okay. So when you say you've got 38 children in the class, and when you say they don't use English, is that in classroom language? Let's focus on that. Requests and sort of going to the toilet and that kind of thing. What is it? All of the 38 children who always speak Spanish, or is it some of them, or most of them, or?
Most of them. I've got a group of 5-6 students which try to use the English inside of the classroom. Sometimes if they want something, they ask in English. If they need a clarification, they say, I don't understand. Can you explain again, please?
Oh.
Or they request authorizations in English.
Yeah. Okay. So there are those 5 who do that, but most of them are using Spanish in that kind of situation. Why do you think those 5 do try to do it and the others don't? What's your explanation at the moment?
I don't know by sure, but I think that because they are motivated, they feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah. So you feel they're a bit more motivated.
Yeah.
Than the others. Yeah.
And sometimes maybe because I'm quite flexible with others. Sometimes others, when they need something, they ask me and I access to their request. Sometimes the others say in Spanish, may I go to the toilet?
Yeah.
And I accept that. Sometimes when I'm conscious of what I'm doing, when they request something in Spanish, I don't understand. Can you say that in English? And try to force them to do it in English.
Okay, so sometimes you do well. Sometimes when they speak in Spanish, you do understand and you respond.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't. Yeah. Is that right?
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you respond in different ways, in different situations. Okay. So it's interesting to know why those 5 do use English. But why do you think the others don't use English?
Well, as I said before, because sometimes I understand them when they speak in Spanish. If I pretend I don't, maybe they're going to feel forced to use the language, to use English.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes when I pretend that I don't understand, they go back to their seats and they wait for the break. They don't insist in going to the toilet.
So there are different. It sounds like there are different.
They are using different strategies.
Yeah. And also different responses among different children. Different.
Yes.
And also you respond differently in different times. Yeah. Sounds like that's happening. And what do you think from this conversation? do you think there's anything that you need to find out more about the situation?
I think that in a way I have to understand, reveal why they don't use English.
Yeah.
If they do not feel comfortable, or if they feel comfortable with the language, try to understand their point of view, why they are not using English, and why other students are using it.
Right.
So maybe try to understand that situation.
Yes.
And also, I think that I have to have clear my position inside of the classroom.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm flexible. Sometimes we understand them when they're speaking in Spanish. So the idea is to be consistent. Try not to be flexible with them. Try to ask them to use as much English as possible and trying to avoid Spanish. But according to our conversation, I think that I have to have clear why they are not using the language inside of the classroom.
I'm going to stop there. There's a little bit more of this conversation with Claudio, but I hope you can see that through our conversation, he started to realize that there were things that he knew, but there were some things that he didn't know, and that it would be useful to find out. And I think the main thing that he discovered that he should try to find out was what students' perceptions were. Would you agree from hearing that? So that could lead him into some exploratory research. But there was also something about his own views about what he should be doing in the classroom in terms of policy of when to ask students to use English, or when to accept that they would speak Spanish. He could have gone straight into making some change. So he could have gone straight into deciding, I'm only going to understand English. But I think he wanted to actually think a bit more. He wanted to reflect a bit more. Just like Andrea about wrapping up, I think he wanted to reflect or find out a bit more about his own policy, what he should be doing in relation to whether to require students to use English when they want to go to the toilet, or whether to require them to use Spanish. Because if we listen to the rest of the conversation, we start to talk about, well, should we force students to use English if they want to go to the toilet? Actually, if they need to go to the toilet, then we should let them, because that's their right to go to the toilet. And so that was the rest of our conversation. So actually, instead of going straight into some change, which would be to make it clearer, because I think he's starting to understand that his policy is not quite clear for the students, instead of making a change, he wants to actually have a question, which is, what should my policy be? So he comes up with two main questions. One is, what should my policy be about requiring students to use English or Spanish in classroom language? But also, what do the students feel? How do the students feel about using English or using Spanish? So there are two main research questions which came out of our dialogue. So partly, I'm going to show you three different kinds of research questions. One of them is exploring your own perceptions about an issue. The other is exploring others' perceptions. And the other is exploring behavior. You don't have to have questions from every one of these, but it depends on your topic. But in Claudio's case, definitely one of his questions was, what do I think or feel about students using English or Spanish in the classroom? Just like Andrea had the question, what do I mean by wrapping up, or what is a good wrapping up? These were basically exploring her own perceptions. And we can do that by reading what others say, but also by reflecting and writing notes about your own feelings. You could see that already Claudio was sort of stepping back in this conversation with me and reflecting about something. in a way that he hadn't done before, where he could continue doing that after this. Another kind of question is exploring what others feel or think about a particular situation. And definitely in the case of Claudio, he was going to ask this question: what do my students think or feel about using English for going to the toilet, or asking to go to the toilet, or other aspects in the classroom? He maybe he would also have a question like, when do students, or which students use English, which students use Spanish? And that would be area of exploring behavior. So potentially from that conversation, Claudia could have one question for each of these categories. So these are just, these are in the handbook, and these are just sort of possible kinds of question that you might have for your own topic, your own concern. If we put them together like this, we can see that another example. This is a teacher who said, the topic or the problem is my students speak in English only to me in the whole class, but they don't, when it's pair work, they don't talk English to each other. We had a little bit example like that earlier. And this teacher could come up with some questions, some research questions related to this topic. In what parts of the class do I think students speak to me? Why do I think it's important for them to speak to one another in English? These are about exploring my own perceptions. Now, the teacher doesn't have to have these questions, but for this teacher, these were important. To step back and think, why do I want them to speak English to each other? Then another important question for this teacher was, what do my students think about this issue? In a minute, we're going to think about, well, how do you actually go and find the answers? That's the last part of today, is to share some ideas for research methods, ways of finding out the information. But obviously, you'd have to go and somehow ask the students. You'd have to go and talk to them, or probably more likely do a kind of questionnaire for this, for exploring others' perceptions, for exploring the students' perceptions. Others could be teachers, or could be parents' perceptions, maybe. But in this case, it's the students. Behavior, well, it'd be good. The teacher says, my students speak in English only to me, but not to each other. But it's good to understand the situation a bit better by asking in pair work which students do and don't speak in English, because it's probably not all of them. And in pair work, when do they start speaking English and when do they not speak in English, just to start to understand the situation better, maybe then plan something new. Okay. Let me just try to move that. Yeah. So let's try to move on. These are possible kinds of questions: exploring my perceptions, exploring others' perceptions, exploring behavior. And we're now going to move on and think about collecting data to answer your questions. So I think we've got about 10 minutes left, and this last part of today's introduction is going to be moving from questions to how to answer your questions. The questions are at the heart of research, and then how to go and answer them. Basically, what I'm going to say is that exploring your own perceptions, there will be particular good methods for doing that. Exploring others' perceptions, there'll be maybe different methods. Exploring behavior, there'll be maybe different methods. And you'll find more detailed explanations in the handbook. Here are some different kinds of evidence or data that you can collect as a teacher in the classroom. And all of these different kinds of evidence or data, they're all things that teachers have actually used. It's not just me saying this is what you could do. These are all methods that real teachers have used, including in the Chilean secondary schools, but also in India and Nepal. And we'll match them against the different kinds of question. Let's just go through, first of all, you can write your own reflections or notes about an issue. And that can be very, very useful to do. I don't know if some of you keep a diary about your classes or keep notes about your classes. It can be a very good way to answer questions. You can also, of course, read what other people have written about a particular topic by looking at the internet, by reading books. You can have conversations with colleagues about a particular topic. You can ask students to do some reflective writing in Arabic, perhaps, or in English, if they have the ability to do that. It can be 5 minutes at the end of a class. If you have a particular topic you want them to reflect about, you could ask them to write about that topic at the end of a class. You can have discussions in the whole class of children, but maybe in a smaller group is better. You're going to get more people speaking more freely. You can record that, or you can take notes. You can have chats or interviews with individuals. You can make a questionnaire. I've put questionnaire number 7 because when teachers think about doing research, they often immediately think about making a questionnaire. But making a questionnaire can be quite time-consuming. And I wanted to show that there are other ways of doing research which don't involve a questionnaire. But of course, you can make a questionnaire and give it to students. Your own lesson plans and materials are sometimes a good way of giving evidence about something. Recording a lesson and then listening to it later can be a good kind of data. Another method is to ask a critical friend, probably a colleague, to come and watch your class and take notes. We could say this is observation. Photographs of the class sometimes are useful. And then students' performance on tasks written or recorded, or on tests, for example, that can be another kind of data. According to your own topic, according to your own research questions, you may use some of these. And there may be other kinds of data as well. And you wouldn't be collecting all of these, you'd be choosing from here. Let's have an example. Go back to this example. My students speak in English only to me but not to each other. Exploring my perceptions. In what parts of the class do I think students speak to me, or why do I think it's important for them to speak to one another in English? From here, sorry, which ones do you think would be useful? Maybe shout out numbers. Which ones would be good for this question? My perceptions. Yeah, I'd suggest that this teacher could number 1, or even number 2, reading what others have said and then writing some reflections. Even having some conversations with colleagues could be useful for clarifying what this teacher feels about this issue. Exploring what do my students think about this? This is a very common kind of question, a very useful question about many, many topics. Which numbers in this case? Yeah, I heard you saying discussion. It depends on, you've got to decide what is possible with your students. In some classes are very, very, very lively classes. You could have a whole group class discussion. But in other classes where they're a bit shy, maybe you'd have to be a smaller group, or even number 4, reflective writing. That's a very useful one because you get the students who are a bit shy also contributing. It could be number 6, could be number 7, very common. And then, exploring behavior. So actually seeing which students do or don't speak English, or when do they start speaking English, so that you can understand the situation better.
Classroom recording.
Yeah, classroom recording. Now, you have to think about that. Is it video or audio? You may or may not have a video recorder anyway, but it can change the behavior, of course. Anyway, a recording, but also maybe number 10 is simpler in some ways. Number 10, if you can get somebody to watch your class. If you can't, it has to be something like a recording, or maybe, if possible, as you teach, just taking some notes. So it could be number 1 as well. Yeah, that's right. So we've had 3 different kinds of research question, and we started to see how you can match methods to questions. Some of you, I hope, maybe read about Mauro in the Champion Teachers Stories of Champion Teachers book. He had interesting research questions. These are his students, and he was interested in how do they behave, or which kinds of seating arrangement are better, individual or group or pair. And his questions were like this: how do my students behave when they are sitting individually? How does the seating arrangement affect work? It's a little bit like Teresa with music, but in this case it's different kinds of seating arrangement. How do students feel about individual work? So what do you think he might have done to answer this question? How do my students behave when they are sitting individually? Or how does the seating arrangement affect individual work? Do you think that was his own perceptions, or others' perceptions, or behavior? These two. This is behavior, isn't it? These two are basically what students do when they are in different groups. And that would then be, from here, it would really be number 10, somebody observing, or even pictures. He did take some pictures, or even lesson recordings. Whereas the other question was, how do students feel about individual work? And if we go back again, remember, be number 4. Or actually, he did number 7. You can read his chapter to see what he did. But he gave them a questionnaire asking about different kinds of grouping. And I think I remember they preferred, they liked pair work best. But I can't quite remember. You have to read the chapter. Better than individual work and better than groups. Okay, so you could go and look at that example with Mauro in the book. This is the summary of what I've just been saying. And this is from the handbook. For exploring your own perceptions, these are, on the left, these are generally good methods. Exploring what other people think, that other people could be is usually students, what students think about a particular issue. And it is a very powerful thing to do if you can ask students. And this is often what teachers say to us they've most learned, is they've started to see their classroom in a different way by asking the perceptions of others. Because we teach every day and we think we know our classrooms, but maybe our classrooms are like that. Very, very diverse and rich and complicated, and we don't know everything that's going on. And many teachers say that by doing this kind of research, they understand much better what's going on, especially from the students' perspectives. And then on the right, behavior. These could be useful. All I've been able to do today really is give you a taster for exploratory action research. As I said, if you want to know more, then do go and look at these books. And I'm going to wrap up just by saying that this is what we've been thinking about, exploratory action research. The kinds of question and the kinds of method we've been talking about in part 2 are to do with exploration. What I'd encourage you to do is to go away, think about a topic, think about some questions, think about some methods. If possible, collect some data, and we will have another session. I think it's in November, but we'll have a follow-up session. And I would really love, if possible, for some of you to go and do that, and then we could then work a bit more about the data that you've got, how to analyze the data, and then how to use that as a stepping stone into changing into action research, which is on the right. But what I'd strongly encourage or hope you to do would be to go and think about what your questions might be, think about what your methods might be, try it out, maybe look at these books to help you. But also, I'm going to suggest that you could contact me, and just let me finish, and then I'll leave my contact email address. So just to finish, I hope that this is. Can you see this still? So that's kind of what we might have done today. So teacher research, action research seems a bit scary, maybe. Different research is not really what teachers do. I won't do it. I can't do it. Where are you on here? How do I do it? I'll try to do it. I can do it. I will do it. Yes, I do it. So that's just to end up. Here's how we started, with some images of research that teachers often have. I said that I hoped by the end you would feel a bit more excited or interested in doing research, teacher research. And I also said that I hope you start to feel that it is relevant to your own classrooms. I hope that it could be useful to at least some of you in relation to your classrooms in Palestine and Gaza. So that's it from me. I'm going to leave you with my contact details, if I can just do that. Let me just find that. No, not that. Yes, this one. So if you like, well, I'd very much hope that you would individually maybe send me some feedback or comments or questions, because, as I said, it would be great if we could interact more, but it's difficult using Zoom like this. But you could also send me just general feedback or comments or questions, also individually, and also send me, if you like, send me your ideas for doing some exploratory research. And I'd be happy to maybe have a little bit more dialogue with you individually. You could send me what your problem or puzzle or concern is that you'd like to work with. You could also send me some research questions that you've thought of and your methods that you're thinking of. And at the end, I've just added another book that you might enjoy, which is about teaching in low-resource classrooms, because a lot of what we've been saying has been connected with difficult circumstances and how to address and maybe improve some of the difficult circumstances. Although, of course, teacher research is limited to what's happening in our classrooms. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do hope that some of you will contact, all of you will contact me if you can, with some feedback. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much for the words. There were lots of information we may use in our class, and we are waiting for the next session.
Yeah, and it would be great if maybe you'd have a little chat now about whether people think they could, go and do something. And I could contact with you as well, that if you write to me what people think about it.
Yes, we will arrange with the Rida to contact with you and send you some research from our classes.
Okay, thank you. Good luck with everything.
Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. Goodbye. Thanks. I'll just stop the recording now.
Yes, okay.